to 8 p.m.
Kaya 959.
On the street,
on the air.
Yep, you're listening to Kaya Biz now. And that's really a reflection of perhaps what comes out of our back pockets at the end of the month. When you've been stretched and strained and paying off bills and taking care of responsibilities, and you say, hold on, is this what I'm earning? Well, to give us some perspective around current trends, themes, and insight that we can determine from the current job market, and how studies reveal that 50% of South Africans feel that they are underpaid in their places of work. Share your thoughts with us. 063-688-0959. But we're joined in conversation by the CEO of Job Crystal. That is Sasha Knott, joining us to give us some insight as she runs a leading and cutting-edge AI-powered recruitment platform. A pleasure to have you with us, Sasha, and thank you for making time.
Thank you so much for having us on the show.
First things first, I think, tell us more about Job Crystal, because your recruitment platform is very intriguing. I'm on your website and I do see that it really does leverage the role of technology to make it a lot more competitive and agile. The black and yellow features on the website, helping us understand, how we can find jobs, whether as entrepreneurs or individuals. But give us some context as to how you implement a job search differently.
Yeah, so we purposely work with SMEs. So the small business in South Africa doesn't have access to revolutionary technology, specifically when it comes to recruitment. So being able to find that ideal person quickly and not by breaking your budget is kind of critical, specifically for SMEs. So we have a very big purpose, is to make a dent in unemployment. So we know that SMEs hire 60% of the workforce. And if we can help them hire the right person, they will be able to grow, which means they'll hire another person, and you get the point of making a dent in unemployment.
100%, and that's what we need. It's the multiplier effect, right, in terms of recruitment. As you've mentioned, at Job Crystal, you run, the background checks. You are a recruitment agency. You use AI to do all the background sourcing. But something intriguing that you also do, that we're going to touch on tonight, is the salary benchmarking. And I think that's an interesting one, because when we look at different sectors in South Africa's economy, some industries are a little bit more easier to predict and have market research on, and others perhaps a lot more vague because of their newness in the industry or their changing dynamics, or the fact that they're unregulated. But give us context as to, salary benchmarking in South Africa and data and insights into this theme that impacts entrepreneurs.
So yes, so salary benchmarks have been around for years. We've often done salary surveys. I remember back in the day when I used to be a developer, and they would do salary surveys, and all the employees would raise their salaries on the survey, because obviously they knew their management team was going to go and look at those surveys. So we use salary benchmark data, not survey data. And what we mean by that is, obviously, when you come onto our platform and you register as a candidate, you're listing what your salary is, as well as when clients are obviously looking to hire people, they're listing their jobs with a salary. So with the range of that, we are able to pull a lot of market research data. And what we've seen from the past is there was a very few number of players doing that in the market, and they were charging quite a lot, which kind of made it inaccessible for the SMEs and for candidates themselves. So to be able to have a tool like that available all online, you don't have to need to go and give all the data. What you need to give is just your job description and the industry. Because as I'm sure you'll know, let's just say an account manager in a technology environment versus an account manager in a financial services environment do very different things and get paid very differently. 100%. So we have to be able to look at the job description, not just the job title.
I've typed in radio presenter into your job title about salaries, and I have yet to get feedback. So I'll tell you how that one goes. But I think that's an interesting point, right? There's some industries, especially where entrepreneurs or SMEs are involved, that SMEs might not be competitive in terms of the salaries and remuneration that they offer their clients. Where do they fall short? I found that sometimes entrepreneurs either pay way too low salaries and they lose staff, or you actually over-reward staff for minimal effort and aren't able to track and manage the return on investment for the fees that you're paying.
Absolutely. So SMEs often set their salaries at what they can afford. So their budget allows for a new person. Let's just say they have 10,000 Rand available a month. That's what they're looking to place that one person in. So they're not using benchmark data. They're literally using what budget cash flow they have available, which causes two problems. So when they're looking to place that person, the length of time to recruit is a lot longer because obviously to go find somebody at that salary when it's not benchmarked correctly, as well as when the person does start, they often keep looking for another job for obviously a higher salary so that the person doesn't stay with them for long enough. So it's almost critical to make sure that they do offer the right salary. The recruitment time would be less and the retention rate of the candidate would be longer, which would be great for the SME, is to make sure that you can match that based on that. And obviously, SMEs mustn't always compare themselves to corporates. SMEs can offer a lot more stuff than corporates do, like flexible working hours, remote working. SMEs are generally a lot more accessible where people can join the SME and do a lot more than they would do in a corporate environment where they're a lot more constrained to one particular role and not being able to kind of stretch their legs and learn more. So SMEs must take that advantage of what else they can offer, not just on salaries.
That's such an important point for entrepreneurs to be mindful of and as potential employers. I guess an interesting theme as well is that for entrepreneurs then looking for recruitment programs and support, are there unique themes that you're finding that are being asked by entrepreneurs and small business owners just to ensure that they have that competitive edge to attract talent?
Yes, and we often say you could give a base salary of what you can afford, but if they increase or they meet the KPIs or increase the revenue, give them incentives, give them commission. So there's different ways SMEs can kind of market the salary that works within their budget and for the employee, so that they are able to kind of live off that salary as well as helping the SME grow. So it's kind of we call it the pot and lid. Every pot has its lid where the employee can find the right employer. Together they can kind of grow the business together.
100%. Let's, I guess, flip the script now and not focus just on entrepreneurs, but the job seekers themselves. And this is where you also help individuals to understand what kind of pricing they should look for. And let's talk about the reality that South Africans believe that they are underpaid. I might be one of those to throw my name in the hat, but give us some context around why this appears to be the sentiment. Are we underpaid in most of our workspaces?
I think sadly females are. So females are still paid less than males in the industry. And that's not just in South Africa. That is in we see a lot of the first world countries where females are still paid less. Not everybody is underpaid. We do a lot of salary benchmark data on corporate side where we can see that, pretty much half the workforce is within line or above, and half the below side is kind of needs to catch up, and it's not out that by that much. What we do find, and you were saying now for candidates, is they can go onto the website, run a benchmark. It's 200 Rand. It's not a lot of money. And we've had candidates give us feedback saying they've taken that report, and the report comes back. It's about 5 pages, giving benchmark on junior, intermediate levels, and senior, and taking it to their boss at increased time and going, look, this is what the market shows I should be earning. I'm earning this. I should be earning this. I think you need to increase my salary. So we're also putting it in the hands of the humans, the people who are getting paid, to be able to take research data to go and fight. I think women often are scared to ask for an increase. It's a difficult discussion to talk about money where men are a lot more comfortable with it. So we give that in the hands for females and males, but specifically giving them an edge onto those increased discussions.
Something out of interest, though, I guess, ask anyone if they're underpaid, and I guess majority of South Africans will say yes, right? Because more money is always great if it is available. So how do you actually determine what one's desired income is versus what they actually practically do in terms of output and the kind of value it generates for their business? Because that's often where employees and employers reach a discourse.
Exactly. And that's why we use the job descriptions. If the job description is saying we require somebody to have a degree plus an MBA, 7 years experience, they need to know this, X, Y, and Z system, put that into the system and it'll tell you what you're meant to be earning. And generally you find if you put in what you do have, I don't have an MBA, I do have a degree but it's not finished, I only have 5 years experience, it's going to tell you where you currently are market based. So I think it's very important to work on what you have as a job description and what you're doing, and then get the data to be able to show you what you should be earning. And sometimes, like I said, we do find some people are overpaid, but most of the time we do find people are underpaid.
What sectors have been overpaid? Tell us more, Sasha.
It's mostly the STEM side. So STEMs are, so that's the science, technology, engineering side is more they're on the right salaries. And I think it's because it's a flooded market. It's skills are limited, so you have to pay for those skills. We find a lot of the engineers side are paid well, so are lawyers. Financial services is generally quite good on the high end. A lot of senior leaders are paid very well. That we see obviously on the executive side and the executive space. Where it comes to obviously where people are struggling, it's those entry-level roles, the call center roles, admin staff. They are generally on the lower end because people are just coming into the market there.
You mentioned the gender pay gap earlier, but what about provincial salary disparities?
Yeah, so Johannesburg still gets paid more versus Cape Town, but it's really interesting having a look at that at the provinces of not just Joburg versus Cape Town, but it goes, Joburg's the highest paid, then Cape Town, then KwaZulu-Natal, and obviously it keeps on going further down with the Eastern Cape, I think, being the lowest and the Northwest. It's still a factor, and it's weird because from having lived in Johannesburg and Cape Town's cost of living is higher than Johannesburg, but Johannesburg still gets paid more.
So interesting. That's one of the reasons why I'm still here, not in Cape Town, though I'd love to be in a coastal city. What I find so intriguing as well is, I guess, just driving competitiveness, because diversity and inclusion is a key theme. It's the gender pay gap. It's new industries and sectors. So for any candidates who are actually looking to further substantiate their value in their places of employment and as a result are looking for greater or a salary increase, how do we need to negotiate that and structure that? We've often heard from HR professionals that, you need to be vocal about your accomplishments, but how does one quantify that?
So yes, I definitely think get your facts in a row. Take a benchmark data like we have on our website, on Job Crystal's website. Go and have a look and show kind of what everybody else is earning from when I go and search. Use AI to give you the data that you need. If you need to go and substantiate why, and go and give the actual reasons. I'm qualified in X. I've got this many years experience. I've won employee of the year or month or whatever it is. I've always said if you don't ask, the answer is no. If you do ask, at least you've got a 50-50 chance of yes or no. So, and sometimes it's quite difficult to do it face-to-face and in words. So sometimes you could email it through to your boss and say, look, this is the data I have. I do think I need a 10% increase and not a 7% increase. Can you please relook at this when increase time comes, as an example?
100%. This might be an unfair question, Sasha, but I think probably, boggles the mind of many, especially in the world of AI and the different types of AI that actually exist. But how have you, I guess, programmed the AI systems that you use to ensure that there aren't any outliers, given that South Africa is such a unique market from a socio-economic point of view, the gender dynamics as well that exist, to ensure that, even with screening and feedback that is given to candidates, that there's no bias or what's the word that they use in technology? What are they?
When they kind of lose the plot.
Yes, basically, yes. Exactly.
When they hallucinate.
Hallucinate, that's the word. Yes, thank you.
So our data, so we've been around for 16 years. So our data is very strong in where we get our data from. So we use our own written algorithm to be able to create the data and the data research that we do. Using other AIs and how do you work around the bias side? Bias is difficult because, unfortunately, history tells us that white males are more educated and experienced, and the machine does learn from history. So that's not a false history, that is a true history. And it's trying to teach an AI of how not to be biased. You can't just bring males back. You have to bring males and females. You can't just bring 30-year-olds back. You have to bring the 20-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds. And it's teaching that machine. And I think from AI, as we built the AI, we thought we could do it a lot quicker than we have. And it's taken 4 years to teach our machine not to be biased. So I think it's being careful on which language models you use. A lot of them, obviously most of them are all created in the US, and to make sure that where you are looking at your data, that it is specifically South African based. It's built by a South African company.
100%. And that's important, especially in the world that we're evolving in. So really, really appreciate that feedback, and that we're using technology to our benefit in our way that best suits us. Such a pleasure speaking to you, Sasha. This has been an exhilarating conversation. And as you've said, you've given us some sharp tools to make sure that if anyone's looking for a salary increase, they need to back it up with the market research, the benchmarking, and of course the value that they bring to their employers in terms of increased productivity or outcomes, especially when it comes to revenue targets, both for big-time employees, employers, and of course entrepreneurs too. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.